Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to our webinar tonight as part of the Saudi Human Capital Club programs. Today, we are going to talk about creating a high-performance team culture, and we will learn from one of the best organizations in building high-performing teams. High-performing teams streamline productivity, foster company growth, and boost business revenue. Creating proper foundation for high-performance teams is becoming ever more important in corporate, where collaboration is increasingly seen as the solution to the superior output. New York Times defines high-performing teams as teams or organizations that are highly focused on their goals and achieve superior business results or objectives set before them. Forbes organization also define high-performance team as a group of people sharing common vision, goals, metrics, and then go ahead to collaborate efforts, challenge each other, and also accountable towards achieve outstanding results. Like any global business, Formula One demands the best from its people. To thrive within, it requires extensive leadership and communication skills, as well as the ability to design, manufacture, develop, and bring to the market a constantly improving high technology product, and constantly work to immovable deadlines with an immense supply chain and tight regulations. Tonight, we are fortunate to learn how effective and high-performing teams at Formula One. Formula One, as you know, it's an engineering company in the sport business industry. It is well known for effective teams which determine the success of their business. To learn more about high-performing teams at Formula One, we are privileged tonight to host Mr. Mark Gallagher. Our guest speaker, Mark Gallagher, has spent his executive career working in the global sport business of Formula One motor racing. This includes spending 15 years on the management board of two well-known Formula One teams, Jordan Grand Prix and Red Bull Racing, and later managing director of Cosworth Formula One engine company. In 2014, he published his book, The Business of Winning, the strategic success from Formula One track to the boardroom, providing insight on high-performance leadership and teamwork, as well as dealing with the fast-changing technologies, business transforming the change. Mark runs his own Formula One consulting business, Performance Insights, and worked with some of the leading teams and drivers in this complex and fascinating sports. So tonight, Mark will start maybe sharing some background about the business of Formula One and what does it take for this business to thrive and succeed. Then we'll spend most of the majority of the time talking about the human aspects of the team success and high-performing team culture, and also talk about the role of the HR in building high-performing teams. Thank you very much for joining. And Mark, thank you for accepting our invitation. The floor is yours.
Thank you so much indeed, Saud, and a great pleasure to have the opportunity
Mark,
to
can
join.
you open your mic?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, mic is opened.
I don't know, but I cannot hear you, Mark.
Okay, can you hear me okay? Testing, testing. I can hear you fine. My microphone is not muted.
I can hear you as well, Mark.
Yeah, the panelists are saying, the delegates are able to hear me. So, okay, so can you hear me okay now?
Yes, Mark, go ahead.
Okay, great. So we'll start again. Thank you very much for having me join you this evening, and a pleasure to have the opportunity to talk about the human factors in the high performance team environment of Formula One. And Saud, thank you so much in your introduction for giving us some of those definitions around what high performance teamwork actually means in business, because that's what we are. We're a business environment, and we are very focused on building these high performance organizations. And that's what I'm going to share with you this evening. I have to admit, it's all due to, all thanks to Baton Global for inviting me to come and meet with you this evening and to facilitate my being able to join you. So thank you to Baton Global for making this possible. Now, I don't know how many of you are followers of Formula One, but let me just start by saying that I'm not going to spend this evening talking about car racing very much at all. I will if you insist, but actually I much more want to talk about the business environment that Formula One is, and in terms of how we build a structure of people and get them to perform to world-class levels. And I think in order to do that, I'm going to give you a little bit of background on our sport. And the background in the sport is purely to help you to have some context around which this high-performance teamwork and this high-performance environment is so essential. Formula One demands that we are the best at what we do. And as you will find out, we have 10 teams in the sport, and every one of those teams does an extraordinary job. So therefore, to be the best in the world, to be successful in this world sport, you really have to be exceptional at delivering, exceptional at operational excellence, exceptional at continuous improvement. And everything from my perspective revolves around the people, how they are managed, how they are empowered, and the degree to which every one of our colleagues brings the best version of themselves to the table. We really demand excellence from everyone in our organization, and those are some of the insights that I'm going to share with you. Now, Saud and I had a good conversation about this evening earlier on, and one thing that we're really keen to do is to answer questions. So if you have questions as we progress, please do submit those questions to us, and Saud and I will discuss any points that you want to raise. I think that's a great benefit of our connected environment that we have in 2020, and a connected environment that has been accelerated with the global pandemic. I like to think there are some positives out of everything that we're going through, and this is certainly a good example where I can join you this evening and talk from home here in the UK. A little bit of background on that to start with. So I'm actually in my office at home, which is just outside Oxford, and it's about 1 hour from London. And I'm at the epicenter of an industry, and that industry is the Formula One industry. I'm going to give you some top line points to think about from a human perspective, because in business, why are we talking about people? Well, we're talking about people because it drives the economy. Jobs drive the economy. We want to have jobs, growth, business. It's essential. The Formula One industry in the UK employs around 12,000 full-time staff, 12,000 full-time employees working in Formula One motor racing. We have about 23,000 people working within our supply chains here in the UK. So you add them together, we're talking about 35,000 full-time or directly and indirectly jobs related to the Formula One industry just here in the UK. And to put that into some perspective, that's about the same size as Jaguar Land Rover as a car manufacturer. So if you think of Jaguar Land Rover as a global car business, the Formula One industry kind of parallels that just in the UK. In the rest of Europe, we have many other jobs as well. Of course, Ferrari are based in Italy. There's a second Italian team as well. So there are about 2,500, 3,000 jobs in Italy directly in Formula One. And in Switzerland, we also have a team based there. So add the whole lot together. And in European terms, it's about 40 to 45,000 jobs involved in our sector. One of the reasons why so many of the Formula One teams are based here in England. So many of the Formula One teams are actually based within about 75 minutes drive of where I'm sitting. If you take a radius of where I'm sitting, within about an hour and a quarter's drive of here, we have 7 Formula One teams. Is because of talent. And it's because of talent, because we invest heavily in building a pipeline of talent, in recruiting the right people into our industry, and in creating the right environment to have the skills and to have the people who we need in order to drive the excellence that we demand. So let me give you a couple of things just to think about, because I think from an HR point of view and from a human perspective, it's interesting to know how and why we have got this cluster of businesses forming really a technology cluster within the UK and the Formula One industry. The first thing is that we have a couple of big initiatives aimed at encouraging children into engineering. Children both at the primary school and early secondary school level, so children aged between 10 and 14. And that's through a program that we have called Formula One in Schools. And Formula One in Schools is where any school at all, be it a primary school or a secondary school, can apply to have a kit which we send to them, and they can effectively form a mini Formula One team in their school. And we ask them to design a very simple car. It's a very simple model car. It doesn't have an engine. It's driven by gravity, so they have to run the car down a slope. And that's a global competition. So every school can enter the Formula One in Schools program. And I have mentored and coached school children involved in the Formula One in Schools program. And to give you some idea, we now have 14,000 schools worldwide participating in the Formula One in Schools program. And this is really important because it means that girls and boys aged between 12 and 14 are being encouraged into more technical subjects, STEM subjects, because we need the sciences, we need technology, we need mathematics, we need the sciences to be studied in order for us to recruit engineers into the Formula One sector. Why is that important? It's important because actually we're competing in the same marketplace as companies like Jaguar Land Rover or Rolls-Royce or British Aerospace or BMW or any of the other major engineering employers. And we have a shortage of engineering talent in Europe. There's a very big deficit in engineering and scientific skills within Europe. And therefore, we're fighting in a highly competitive marketplace to attract the best talent into our industry. And that's why we have that Formula One in Schools program. Get them while they're young, get them interested while they're young, and make these boys and girls realize that there is actually a thing called engineering where you can design and create great technologies of the kind that we use in Formula One. The second program is for undergraduates. That's Formula Student. And Formula Student is run by universities, and essentially undergraduates can apply to join the Formula Student program, and we get them to actually design and manufacture a small racing car, very inexpensive, but nevertheless it is a racing car, so they have to learn how to design all the different vehicle systems, and they can actually race those. And the Formula Student program is really super successful because it means that having converted children into becoming engineers and go to university, we're then encouraging them to actually focus on the kind of disciplines needed to come into the world of Formula One. So that's aeronautical engineering, it's vehicle dynamics and automotive engineering, and it's information technology. Because essentially in Formula One, those are the three disciplines that we're most interested: aeronautical and aerospace engineering, automotive engineering, and information technology. So that gives you a little bit of an idea of how we cultivate the talent to come into the Formula One industry in this country. And it's a global network. We don't want the best people in England. We don't want the best people in the UK. We want to attract the best people in the world. And so if you look at, for example, my former team, Red Bull Racing, in a team of 1,100 employees, we have about 32 nationalities, I think, at the last count. So people from all over the world working for us. And I'll talk a little bit about the importance of diversity of our talent, not just men and women, but people from different cultural backgrounds, because we are a great believer that when you're building a high performance team, it is so important to have a diversity of thought being brought to the table, because innovation and creativity is part of our competitive advantage in a high performance environment, thinking about how we can do things better. And there is no question that as you broaden the diversity of thought within your teams, you get a diversity of innovation, of thinking out of the box, and that's extremely important. And I think we can maybe talk a little bit about that during some of the discussions a little bit later. So that's kind of my introduction to start off with. I'm going to share my screen and give you the benefit of some of the slide content. Now, as you will all know, when you're on Zoom and you're sharing slide content, my image will become a thumbnail and you'll be looking at my slides. I'm intentionally going to come in and out of slide share or screen share with you, because we do want to have some discussions with you, and I'm not going to just present the whole time. We want to make sure this is as interactive as possible. Let's just have a look.
Yeah, Mark, while you're just sharing your screen, I just would like...
Yeah, hi, Saud.
Yeah, thank you. Tell our audience, if you have any question, just please write your question in the Q&A box. Not in the chat, but it's in the Q&A, so it will be easy for us to handle that. So please just write your question there.
Great job. Okay, that's great. I'm looking forward to questions. I think that's one of the great benefits of this format. And so I look forward to chatting through these points. So I'm really going to go through just the first, I think I'm intentionally going to break my slide deck into kind of 3 parts. So I'm going to come in and out of this in 3 segments. The first thing really to share with you is a very obvious thing, a photograph of Formula One cars in 2020. This is a photograph taken actually on Sunday at the Russian Grand Prix. And I think the first thing to share with you is that when people come to work for us, they come to work for an organization that makes a piece of technology. As Saud said in his introduction, Formula One teams design, manufacture, and produce a piece of technology. This is it. It's a Formula One racing car. If you compete in Formula One, it is mandatory that you design the car that you race. So unlike a lot of other forms of motorsport around the world, in Formula One, you actually have to create the technology that you compete with. And that's why we employ so many people, because effectively we're in the automotive sector. We have to have the capability to have in-house design and manufacturing of all the technologies that go into creating a car. So although we're in the low volume prototype manufacturing sector, for the people who come to work for us, we're looking for the skills and disciplines that you would expect with anyone working in a high technology manufacturing sector, certainly the automotive sector. And as I said earlier on, when we're cultivating the talent, when we're reaching out to those school children and those undergraduates to encourage them to come into our industry, we're looking from a technical perspective for people to come from 3 disciplines, because what you have in a Formula One car is aerospace engineering and technology. So the cars are aerodynamic, but they're aerodynamic in the opposite way to an aircraft. Instead of an aircraft taking off, a Formula One car is pushed down onto the ground by the aerodynamics. So it's an inverted jet fighter is the way I like to describe it. The second suite of technologies is from automotive. It is a car, so automotive engineering. And then the third suite of technologies from information technology. And digital transformation has been just as important in Formula One as in any industry. In fact, I would argue that we were among the very first industry. Certainly we were the very first global sport to embrace digital transformation going back 35 years. We see the benefit of having a fully connected device. And so these are the technologies that go into creating the cars that we operate. Something else to share with you about the people who come to work for us. Like any manufacturing business, we need to recruit people in sales, in marketing, in finance, in HR, in administration, in procurement, supply chain management, quality control, all of the normal functions and disciplines that you would expect within a high technology business. So the men and women who come to work for us there's a wide range of jobs across those sort of 1,000 or so roles that we have in our business. And as I said earlier, we want to have the best team of people in the world come together. Something else to share with you about the people who come to work for us is that when we employ people in our environment, we very much make sure that everyone understands when they come to work for us that it is a competitive landscape. Now, clearly Formula One is a sport, and I think in a sporting environment, maybe it's easier to talk about the competitive landscape that we operate in, but actually all businesses are in a highly competitive environment. And one of the reasons that it's important to talk about this competitive landscape is that if someone comes to work for us at let's say Ferrari or Red Bull Racing, it's extremely important that they know that one of the reasons we need them to collaborate as a high performance team is that if we are not operating as a high performance team, you can be sure that one of our 9 competitors will be out there beating us every day. So part of that high performance team mindset when we recruit people is to inculcate into them the importance of understanding that we need to be the best team that we can be because we have 9 competitors out there trying to beat us. So that's those are the 10 teams that race in Formula One. Hopefully some of you will recognize the brands. I think Ferrari don't need much introduction. Ferrari has been, I mean, it's the most globally famous automotive brand in the world. Ferrari is also the only team that's competed in Formula One for all 70 years that our sport's been in its existence. This year, we're commemorating the 70th anniversary of Formula One starting in 1950. But amongst those other competitors, you have car manufacturers like Renault and Mercedes-Benz. You have an energy drinks company in the form of Red Bull Racing. We have an American team, the Haas team, which is part of an engineering conglomerate. And so lots of different brands and organizations all competing within our industry, but actually all trying to do the same thing, which is to create fantastic technology and to go out and win in terms of the sporting competition. So that's a really important point for our people to think about. The other thing that is important is that in the same way that we design and manufacture thousands of components, the same way that we design and manufacture all the technologies which come together to create our product, we need all of those components to work together seamlessly. So this is all about creating a technologically advanced, highly integrated, extremely efficient, high-performing car. Well, I like to think that that very much reflects how we want our people to be. We want our people to similarly work together seamlessly, to be fully integrated into how they collaborate and work together in order to give us the best product in the world with which to go out and compete in Formula One. So really from the very starting point in creating this amazing piece of technology, we are focusing on our people understanding the challenge that we're up against as a business. Now, I'm going to come out of the slide share just there because I think we have perhaps already got a question coming in. Saud, would you like to? I'm just going to actually go in and answer that live.
Okay, Mark?
Yeah.
You can maybe just pause for a minute, so take some. A question from Ziad. He said, we know that attitude is as much important as the knowledge or maybe more. Will you select undergraduate for a scholarship to work for your ultimately? How do you ensure they have the positive attitude? I mean, yeah. How you measure their attitude?
Yeah, really good question. And of course, this is cutting to the core of what I'm talking about together to this evening. To get people to work together, they have to have the right attitude. And particularly when you're dealing with, say, undergraduates applying for a job or graduates applying for a job or an apprentice applying when they're haven't gone to university, maybe they've left school when they're 16 or 18. How do you make sure that you've got the right people? Well, The good news is what we find time and again in Formula One is that when we recruit people at a young age, they are actually ideal for us to mold into the style of person that we want them to be, because they haven't yet had experience in the working environment. So we have a wonderful opportunity from day one to show them the right behaviors, that we want people to be open and honest and transparent in the work that they do. We want people to understand that in a high performance team environment, if you make a mistake, you can be open about it and we will support you. We avoid blame cultures in Formula One, for example. So we have an open, honest, transparent environment. A young person coming into that environment, which is a very positive, high performance environment, they soon get to see how we operate. Formula One teams are not structured in a vertical hierarchy, command and control way. There are much flatter structures. We have short lines of communication, and actually people who come in at graduate level quite often find within 2 or 3 years that they're sitting in pretty important meetings and being asked to play critical roles within our day-to-day delivery. So we empower people at an early stage. And the other thing I want to say to you, Zaid, is that, and it is such a good question that you ask, another way that we make sure we get the right people is we run a lot of internship programs. And I mean, I remember very well my own son going on an internship program, not in Formula One, but actually with Airbus in the aerospace industry. And it's great to see a 19 or 20-year-old person enjoy a 1-year internship in a business, because they get to see how it works and it excites them. It opens their minds to how you operate as a business. And of course, if you give them a proper internship, by which I mean you actually embed them within the areas and the disciplines that they're interested in, I mean, they come away wanting to come and work for you because they have enjoyed that experience so much. So the use of internships and trial periods is extremely important. But again, I emphasize the point that in filling our pipeline of talent from schools and from universities, we find talent joining us absolutely open to learning how to work in a high performance team environment. It is much more difficult in our experience, much more difficult when you want to recruit someone at a senior level and you've got someone in their 30s or 40s or 50s coming in to work for you in Formula One, because Formula One is such a competitive environment. People who have a fixed mindset can often find it quite challenging because of the reasons I mentioned. It is about openness, honesty, transparency. It's about driving a sense of urgency in how we work on a day-to-day basis. It's absolutely avoiding a blame culture. So, you know, we're not interested in employing someone who either hides their mistakes or wants to blame a colleague when something goes wrong, because that's not going to be constructive. We actually want an environment in which if someone makes a mistake, we metaphorically put our arm around them as an organization and say, how can we help you? Do we need more training, resource, help, expertise, whatever it may be? So that's really important. So do you want to go on to the next question?
Yeah, second question from Salam, and again about hiring a candidate to your team. And he said, what kind of questions we should ask to know if the person or the candidate fits within the corporate culture?
Yeah, really good one. So at Red Bull, for example, one of the things that we did when recruiting people was we spent a lot of time asking them about their hobbies and their interests to find out what it is that makes them tick as a person. Because one of the ways that you can not only motivate people to work for you, but also keep people, because retaining talent is an extremely important part of what we want to do, is actually to understand what makes them tick. So it's not about saying, it's not about asking them so much a specific question. It's more about seeing what are their interests, because this will probably surprise you, but we get a lot of people apply for jobs in Formula One who are fans. I mean, they're a fan of the sport, so they apply for the job, and they'll sit in an interview and they'll tell you how wonderful they think Formula One is, and they're so passionate, and they want to work for you because you're a Formula One team. We're a little bit less interested in that. We want to know about them as a person. We want to know their academic qualifications, their experience in the relevant fields and disciplines, and what their enthusiasms and passions are as an individual, as a person, to understand them. Because we don't want to employ 1,000 fans who want to have an exciting job in Formula One. You know, less than 10% of our employees travel the world to the races. More than 90% of the people who come to work for us just work in a factory, and it's a factory in England, so it's not particularly glamorous. The weather's not very good. So actually understanding the person and what are their motivations is an extremely important part of our quest to get the right people on board. And I think that kind of that would be my best summary of how we interview people. It's finding out what makes them tick, and whether they're an open person or whether they're a closed individual. Because again, within the engineering disciplines that we recruit from, we very often find extremely capable engineers who perhaps have spent so many years in academia that they can develop some quite closed mentalities. So they're very, very focused on niche areas of engineering. And of course, that's a strength because they're experts in their field. But when you come to work in Formula One in a high performance and team environment, you have to think about the effect of your work on all of the people around you. So there's no point employing a brilliant engineer who wants to work on his own or her own and not collaborate. So the personality and their openness and their willingness to work with other people becomes an extremely important focus for us. And of course, when we ask that question, you know, how do you hope to contribute to our team? What do you think you can bring to our overall team environment? We're listening for words around collaboration, sharing, openness, transparency. We're looking for the individual who's going to bring some really good human strengths to what is a technical business.
Yeah, I'll ask a question, and I think that will also link to the previous questions about people and attracting candidates. And the question from Maja saying, what's the biggest challenge in talent development in Formula One industry? You work in a very unique industry, so definitely the core business for you is maybe engineering.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. What's the biggest challenge?
Yeah, so the biggest challenge for us is unquestionably the amount of competition that we face from other major engineering businesses. As I mentioned earlier on in my introduction, when you're recruiting people into Formula One, you're recruiting engineers against Airbus, against British Aerospace, against Rolls-Royce, against BMW, against the car industry. Against aerospace and then all the other technologies. And again, in the information technology landscape, which is so important to us, information technology is everywhere these days. So we're competing against businesses across a wide range of categories. And the way in which we tackle that, as I mentioned earlier on, is we fill our pipeline with talent. So the car industry, until quite recently, used to wait for the graduates to come out of university, and then we'd try and recruit them. We don't wait for the graduate intake. We are reaching out to school children and saying, consider engineering, consider Formula One. There's also a really important thing that we have done over the last 20 years, and that is we have built programs with the universities, which means that over a dozen universities in the United Kingdom now offer Formula One engineering degrees. Now, a Formula One engineering degree is quite different from a general mechanical engineering degree. So if you do Formula One engineering, there are modules from mechanical engineering, there are modules from aerospace engineering, and then there are modules from information technology and several management disciplines as well. So being able to, for an 18-year-old school leaver to be able to go to university and actually do a 3-year degree in Formula One engineering or a master's degree in Formula One engineering means they can really specialize early on. And of course, guess what? If you want to get into Formula One, if you're a teenager who really wants to work in Formula One and from an engineering perspective, if you do those degrees, you are really giving yourself a head start when it comes to recruitment, because we will know that you already have the skill sets in terms of the knowledge that we demand for our area.
Yeah, I mean, with a very aggressive maybe competition with the 8 of your competitors, I mean, we have a question from Gasem about attracting talents from other competitors.
Yeah, so this is this has been an issue over the years. I would say that historically, so if we go back more than 10 years ago, historically it was an issue, because essentially if you became competitive, if you were a very competitive Formula One team, if you were winning, one of the things that would happen is your competitors would start trying to poach your staff and headhunt your staff. And they would very often do so in the most basic way possible, which is to offer them more money to try and recruit great people. I think the industry has done a lot of growing up. And actually, I think the people who work in our industry have done a lot of growing up as well in recent years, because what you now realize in a high performance team is if you're working in a high performance team, if you're working in an environment where your organization is super successful, it takes quite a lot to convince you to leave that. Because if you go into another organization, if you're tempted away by a bigger paycheck, you go into an organization which is not of that same and not same, it's not that same level of competitor, it's going to be a pretty depressing experience. And I have seen this firsthand many times, where people leave a top organization to take a bigger paycheck elsewhere. You know, within 6 months, they're regretting it, because they realize that actually one of the reasons they were so successful is that they were part of a wonderful team. So actually, as you build a super successful team, if you build a team of high collaborators, if you build a team where you have the right behaviors, trust, respect, empowerment, you know, good cross-functional communications, everyone understanding that they're part of an organization that is on a positive upward trajectory, people will not want to leave that environment. And at the moment in Formula One, for any of you who have an awareness of Formula One at the present time, you know, the most dominant team in Formula One today is Mercedes-Benz. The reason Mercedes-Benz is the most dominant team in Formula One today is that it is the best team of people. It is the highest performing team. On every metric, Mercedes-Benz has the best team. They retain staff. They have better staff retention than almost anyone else. Red Bull Racing, my former team, is right up there with them as well. And Red Bull's actually second in the World Championship at the moment. So again, a great measure of success in a wonderful team is people don't want to leave. So they have very, very high staff retention levels. They have no problem recruiting people whenever they do have an opportunity, whenever there is a role to fulfill. They have no shortage of applications. I'll give you one data point on that. They had a job going 3 weeks ago, which they advertised online, and they had 7,300 applications for that one job, which is from all over the world, because it is a global network that we are reaching out to. But that goes to show the huge appeal that there is for engineers and people who are fascinated to come and work in our industry. So you know, that's essentially it. Build a winning team, and people will not want to leave you.
Okay, we still have many questions, but I will just give you maybe the chance to continue, Mark.
Yeah, sure.
We can pause again.
Yeah, absolutely. Definitely will do.
Yeah.
Definitely will do. So let's just go in and talk about some of the other things which happen when people come to work for us. Well, this might surprise you as topic, but one thing we like to do is to share with our employees the challenges that our business is having, because in a high-performing team environment, one of the worst things that can happen is that the staff feel unsure, uncertain, unhappy. They start reading things online or in the media. And in a sport like Formula One, which has a lot of media coverage, there is a lot of public discussion about our business on a day-to-day basis. 24/7, there's going to be information online about our business, how we're doing, the positives and the negatives. So one of the things that we try to make sure we do is to keep our people well informed, because of course any business is going to face a challenge. The challenge is going to be a lot worse if your people are uncertain about what's going to happen and unhappy, and it leads to disruption within the business environment. So keeping that positive flow of communications is extremely important. If you have a look at the business challenges that Formula One as a global sport has faced in the last 20 years, so let's just take the last 2 decades, we have seen the dot-com bubble in the United States back in 2000. This is when major technology companies had significant problems. There was a crash on the NASDAQ stock exchange. A lot of major technology companies actually went to the wall. And when those companies went to the wall, that impacted on our industry, because many of those big technology companies were partners, technology partners, or even commercial sponsors of Formula One. So here you have a scenario where something that happens in another sector actually has a really big impact on us. And it's important that our people know how we're going to deal with these kind of upsets when they come along. A second example was in 2005. So 5 years later, we saw the end of tobacco sponsorship. Formula One as a sport historically always benefited from many hundreds of millions of dollars of sponsorship from the tobacco industry. And that was banned in 2005. There was a global ban on tobacco advertising and sponsorship in sport. And that led to about 70% of the revenue. Think about that as a shock to the system. So 70% of the revenue that we had from our sponsors disappeared because of the ban on tobacco sponsorship. And on top of that, we had the financial crisis in 2008. So in an 8-year period, we saw 3 major economic factors which had a big impact on our industry. And as I will go on to explain, when we sit down and talk to our people each week, and it is something we do every week, keeping our people informed, these are very often the kind of topics that we end up discussing. How is it impacting on our business? What strategies are we deploying to solve these issues? How are we as a business going to build a sustainable, profitable, growing business in the very long term? Every industry at the present time worldwide is facing a major crisis of some kind because of COVID-19. So you've either, if any of you have colleagues in the airline industry, you'll know only too well, most of them are grounded. On the flip side, we have people working in online businesses who are facing exponential growth, and they're having to deal with a different set of problems. But the fact of the matter is that every industry and every business is going to face crisis and challenges at some point. And in a high performance team, you don't forget about your employees in terms of the communications loop. It's vital that they understand where we are at as a business, how we are confronting these challenges, and what our plan is going forward. Just to show you a few headline points about other issues that have faced us, environmental sustainability, big issue in Formula One. We burn fossil fuels in order to have Formula One racing. We fly about 500 tons of equipment to each race around the world. Not surprisingly, in the last 5 to 10 years, more and more of our customers are asking us, what are we doing to solve our environmental sustainability issues? And as a result of that, we have announced in the last 12 months that by 2030, the whole of Formula One as a sport is going to become environmentally sustainable through a carbon neutral strategy for 2030. reasons that Aramco has joined Formula One as a corporate partner this year. It's all part of a 2030 focus to offset and mitigate the effects of burning fossil fuels and improving our environmental footprint. So these are all challenges that we have faced, and COVID-19 is just the latest of them. And of course, it's led to a huge, it's led to a whole huge set of challenges this year for everyone who works in our industry. So let me just move on from explaining the challenges to talking about the solutions, because the solutions that we have come up with have required us again to think about the impact on our people. So what is the impact on our people of some of the solutions that we've put in place? Well, let's just take one example, and that is that in the last 20 years, in order to mitigate the effects of economic cycles and all these challenges which are outside our control, we have actually expanded our business. We've grown our business globally. So starting in 1999 in Malaysia, we began to have big Formula One events outside of Europe. And really, I would almost characterize our industry as being essentially European from 1950 until 1999. And then since 1999, it's gone global. Now, think about this slide from a perspective of the people who work for us. We now have 22 events around the world. This means at the very least 24 to 25 weeks travel for those people who work for us in our racing team. And they're not traveling in Europe anymore. They're traveling to Australia, to Singapore, to Vietnam, to Bahrain, to Abu Dhabi, to Russia last Sunday in Russia. It's a global footprint. So we're expecting the people who come to work for us to not only be high performing in terms of their mindset and the teamwork and the collaboration, but also to have the resilience to work in a business that is incredibly demanding. They're going to be traveling, they're going to be away from their families, they're going to be away from their colleagues. And this is another point that I want to talk about. They're going to be away from our colleagues, which means that we somehow have to build a high performing team while working remotely. And again, this connected environment, which has come under the focus so much during COVID-19, is something that we have really been using for the last 20 years. Remote working for us is a completely standard procedure. So the World Championship looks terribly glamorous, but actually from the perspective of the people who work for us, this means a 6 month of the year commitment to delivering operationally as well as possible in any of the major parts of the world. So we're 1 week in Asia, next week in the Americas, back in Europe. It's an ever-growing, ever-demanding challenge for everyone who works for us. And this is all part of us building a sustainable business. By going global, we are no longer at the mercy of European economic cycles. We're now working on a much more broadly based global platform, and that's obviously having an effect on our people. There's a benefit of this, and the benefit of this diversification around the world as our business means that we're now attracting talent from all over the world. So we are now as likely to have engineers applying for jobs from the Gulf or from Asia Pacific or from the Americas as we are to have people applying for jobs here in Europe. So this growth in our business in terms of its global footprint has led automatically to us having the opportunity to recruit talent from all over the world. So if you go into the universities where we have these students studying Formula One engineering degrees, you will find students from China and Vietnam and Japan and Singapore, and it's a much richer, much more diverse pipeline of talent that is being grown as a result of that. This is where we have moved as an industry. I mentioned under the challenges that we've seen big challenges in terms of corporate sponsorship. I mentioned the ban on tobacco sponsorship. I mentioned the financial crisis, the dot-com bubble. Our business model that we operated to in the past effectively broke. Now, when your business model breaks, when you face a really challenging time, of the kind that many businesses are facing this year in 2020, it is so important that we explain to our people how we're going to tackle this, what strategies we're going to come up with in order to ensure that they keep their jobs, and actually, more importantly, not just keep their jobs, but actually thrive in the future as we sustain and grow our businesses. So one of the big changes over the last 20 years is that we now sell technology solutions into industry. And here on the screen, you have an example of one team, Williams, who are selling battery technology to Airbus for high altitude drones, and these are weather drones. They're selling battery technology and electronic systems for electric bicycles, for electric cars, automation systems, and even in the case of their aerofoil technology for supermarkets, they have developed a technology which uses their knowledge of aerodynamics to enable supermarket fridges and freezers to keep the food frozen and chilled while keeping the customers nice and warm in the aisles. Now, this is a slide that you would not expect someone in Formula One to be sharing with you. It's a slide about aerospace, about mobility, about the electrification of vehicles, about energy efficiency. But this is where our industry has moved. And as a result, it's even more appealing to the people who want to come and work for us, because if you're a young engineer and you come and work for us in Formula One, you'll not only end up working in the racing team, but you'll also have opportunities to work in these diversified engineering projects. And it's extremely exciting. And it's across the whole spectrum of our industry that this is happening. And the result of that is very much, sorry, I'll just go back to that slide. The result of that is that this diversification strategy, going global and diversifying the types of products that we create, this has actually motivated an even larger base of talent to come and work for us. And I'm just going to stop the slide share at this point, because I think we've got some more questions to come in. But really, I wanted just to show you that kind of picture of how our industry has changed. It's gone through big challenges. It's gone through a lot of transformation. And by keeping our people well informed of that, you know, the issues that we're facing as a business, what we're doing to correct them, it actually helps people to keep the faith with you that actually these challenges are not going to be existential for them, that actually we are in the business of protecting their jobs, of developing long-term business strategies, which is going to make our business resilient. And that's really been part and parcel of the Formula One journey in recent years. So shall we just go into the next set of questions?
Oh, yes. Thank you very much. Normally what we see about the Formula One racing is the tip of the iceberg. You know, people know the drivers, you know, Formula One drivers, Michael Schumacher, Ayrton Senna, and all these people, this legendary. But what people do not see is the high performing teams behind that. If we just take an example of the engineering teams at the pit stop.
Yeah.
And I think at each pit stop you have around 20 to 22 people working in a team.
Yeah. So in a Formula One pit stop, we have 22 people, and they have to carry out 36 tasks in about 2 seconds.
2 seconds. So my question for this one, you know, definitely we're talking about the team alignment. Team dynamics is very critical for the success of the team. For the drivers, yes, you take them through the simulators, you take them through the computer games, and this is how people are trained. My question, before deploying your engineering teams to the pit stop, what kind of training to make sure the team dynamics, the team alignment, and to make sure the team, especially it might take some time, and during that time you might also lose some of the team members during that.
Yeah, sure. So the pit stop is a very public example of the teamwork that we have in a Formula One organization, but it's only one example. I could show you 100 other examples of the teamwork that goes on in our factories, in our race team operations. But the pit stop is a very public example because, of course, it gets seen on television. And the way in which we create a pit stop team is that, first of all, we will have around about 35 mechanics working for us in a Formula One team at the race. So the pit stop crew is 22 of those 35 mechanics. So the mechanics effectively have to apply to join the pit stop team. And it's quite a prestigious job, as you can imagine, to be part of the pit crew. The interesting thing is that to build that team, first of all, we need everyone to understand what's required of them, because it's a pit stop is not just a very high performance activity to do, it's also a very high risk activity. And in building a high performing team in Formula One, we're not just achieving great performance, we're also managing risk. Formula One as an industry used to be an industry where we saw a lot of fatal accidents and a lot of serious injuries to people. And if any of you work in industries where health and safety is a key issue, I can promise you that in Formula One, it's absolutely central to what we do. So the safety of any system or process and the human behaviors around that is absolutely critical. So the first thing that we do is we make sure, though, that the pit crew understands we want them to be safe, we want them to be efficient, and of course we want them to be high performing. The second thing that we do is we support that team by making sure that we look after their well-being. Now, this is a really interesting topic because I think some of you might imagine that a Formula One mechanic is, some big strong guy who's, used to working on cars. Actually, the reality is that we have both men and women in pit stops, and it's not about physical strength. It's actually about mental alertness. It's about well-being. It's about physical fitness. So we need people to have the right nutrition, the right diet, the amount of sleep that they get. And so these are really important factors for us. So if you look at a pit crew, you tend to find 22 relatively young, very, very fit, well-rested people who are literally full of energy up to do the job that's required of them. The next thing is we don't tell them what to do. They develop the system themselves. This is not about command and control. It's about saying to 22 people, okay, we know what has to be achieved. Go away and refine the process. And because our teams of people, because it is the teams of people who are constantly refining the process, we go faster every year. So we see continuous improvement because the people who are doing it are also looking for the opportunities to improve. If the pit stop was simply being conducted by the boss telling them what to do, pit stops would just remain static, that everyone would be doing exactly the same job all of the time. We're not interested in a static environment. We want continuous improvement. So the pit stop crew are motivated in themselves to find ways to make the pit stop more high performing, whilst at the same time looking after the risks. And the final thing to say to you, Saud, on that particular question, and it is an interesting one. From time to time, we will find a super talented mechanic who is unable to be part of the pit crew because they don't have the mental strength to deal with the pressure. It is a uniquely high pressure role that they have to do. And I've had firsthand experience of dealing with people who have not been able to step up to that particular challenge. It's a very interesting thing to witness, where you have a wonderful employee who's a brilliant mechanic and they apply to join the pit crew. And then you discover that actually they find the pressure too much. They don't sleep at night, they're worrying about it. And no matter what you do to help them, no matter how much training you give them, no matter how much support, actually, they're not suited to that frontline activity. Now, what do you do in that situation? Well, you don't sack them. They're a brilliant mechanic. So you put them on to simply doing what it is that they're brilliant at. They go on to continue to be a great mechanic. So the pit stop crews are full of very fit, talented, mentally resilient people who can cope with pressure. And it's certainly a prestigious thing to do, but there's a lot of demands that come with that. And I think the biggest takeaway of all is that this is about taking a group of motivated people and empowering them to deliver the outcome that you're looking for.
Yeah, thank you, Mark. Just for our audience, the pit stop is the terminology, but I think the pit stop refers to the station where cars stop for maintenance.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
I'm actually going to show an example of that at the end of the presentation.
We have seen, and you know, for me, the success of the Formula One, yes, it is actually winning the race. But winning the race, it means just you have a very skillful, experienced driver who is able to run. So it's one individual effort. Yes, with all the people working in the back. But for me, the success of this one is the pit stop, actually a crew where you have 22 people and they need to perform 36 tasks in 2 seconds.
Yeah.
And you know, I think that requires a lot of work, actually. It's not just preparing someone, because, for example, you might have very skillful driver like the Formula One driver who won the Brazilian, I think, Grand Prix, and he was, I think, 17. He was a teenager.
Yeah.
And he was able to win the race even before getting his driving license. So, because some people, they work in the PlayStation and computer games, so they have the skill of this one. Yeah. But actually, it's the team alignment that you get at the stop crews, where they need to work in this one. And I have seen many videos, probably our colleagues also say, the videos of the people working in the pit stop. You will show us one of this one.
Yeah, I
just
will do.
One final question before we move to the next, and we still have many questions, is how to manage mistakes, especially, mistakes, you know, done by the driver. These are vital, and this probably will cause maybe the loss. And this is how you lost Ayrton Senna and many other drivers in this one, because of the human error. But if you have mistakes, people who maybe make mistakes at the pit stop, you know, part of the crew, like the guy who did like a shortcut to one of the procedure that caused one of the car to go on fire. How do you manage mistakes like this one? Do you remove the person from the team, or how do you do this? How you manage the mistakes?
So we have a saying in Formula One, which is, you can use your failure to fuel future success. So every time you fail, every time you make a mistake, you use that as a learning opportunity. And if you learn from it as an individual and you learn from it as an organization, you improve. So in high-performing teams, we use mistakes and we use failures as a learning opportunity. And this enriches the opportunity for the business to perform better each time. It's about continuous improvement. And I could give you, I mean, I will be talking later on in the presentation about this exact point, because when it comes to staff engagement, when it comes to talking on a weekly basis with our employees about how we're performing as a business, we can talk about the good things that are happening. You know, what are the positive outcomes each week? But we also need to talk about the negative things that are happening. What's not working? What went wrong? What happened last weekend that didn't enable us to win? Which component on the car broke? Which process didn't work out? Part of a high performance team culture is you talk about your successes, but you are also completely open and honest about your failures and your mistakes. And if this is human error, if it is one person making a mistake, we want them to tell us what their mistake was. One of the things I find really interesting, so in these high performance environments, is if you have the wrong leadership and you have the wrong culture, people hide their mistakes. So if they make a mistake, they just hide it. Now, if you have an organization like a Formula One team of 1,000 full-time staff, if you have 50 people making mistakes and you have 50 people hiding their mistakes because they're afraid of the boss, I mean, you have a big problem. You've got 50 sets of errors going on the whole time. So actually, why do you want to have that environment? You want the opposite. Every time someone makes a mistake, we want them to come in straight away and say, listen, I messed up. You know, I tried to do it this way, and actually this is what happened, or I forgot to do a job on time. We need to know. So bring us your problems. And this is a difficult thing, because the natural human instinct is to try and please your boss or to please your company and to get everything perfect. Well, guess what? Human error is something that none of us is exempt from. We all make mistakes at some point, not just in our life, but probably every day. I mean, I know I still make mistakes, But the reality is that you learn from them. And part of building a high performance team is just using those opportunities to improve. And ultimately, you keep moving on a positive upward trajectory.
Yeah. I mean, just the last question before we move. And as I'm going through the history of Formula One, I think the biggest accident you have witnessed is in 1994 when you lost Ayrton Senna, not because he was very famous, he was a champion, but because that accident was on TV, was live on TV for the whole world.
Yeah.
And I think from that, the strategy of, or maybe your business model has been work. I mean, this was a defining moment for Formula One to change the way they do business to make sure that they do not have any fatal accidents from that. So what has been done after 1994 to make sure that you stop losing drivers?
I mean, it's an interesting topic because the reality is that when we got to a point where we decided as an industry that we didn't want to have any more fatal accidents, the first thing that we did was to have an agreement at the leadership level that we would make safety the #1 priority for our businesses. And not only to make sure that that was a #1 priority, but that the necessary resources were put in place to make sure that safety technology, safety systems and processes were deployed. And then the most important thing, which was that our human teams saw a change in culture. I would really say to you that before 1994, the culture within Formula One was not safety conscious. It was a very performance focused environment to the point where the performance came before everything, including safety. And some of the decisions that were made in the past, which led to the fatal accidents ultimately, that was all to do with people being totally focused on performance. So it made us as organizations take a step back and say, yes, we want a high performance outcome, but we don't want a high performance outcome at the cost of people's lives. And you only have to look at the best example of safety in a high-tech environment, which is the airline industry around the world. I mean, flying is the safest form of transport that you can deploy, and there's a reason for that. The aviation industry has been on a long-term trajectory towards getting their people, their systems, and their processes aligned around safety, and that's what made the Boeing 737 MAX disasters that happened a couple of years ago so extraordinary, because that's not typical of the industry. And as some of you will know, the report into those accidents has shown systemic cultural failures within Boeing. And again, this comes down to people problems. So the Boeing 737 MAX issue is, yes, there was a technical reason, but the technical reason came from the human factors in terms of the pressures that people were under within the business environment. So from a Formula One perspective, whether it's dealing with safety or whether it's dealing with high performance, it all comes back to the people, how we recruit them, how we manage them, and how we cultivate the right culture in our team.
Thank you very much, Mark. We still have many questions, so you may continue and we'll go back to the questions.
Yeah, sure. That's great. Well, I'm very conscious of time, so I'm going to accelerate some of the slide content that I'm sharing with you. Let's talk about let's just talk about the human factors a little bit more. So here's an individual that some of you will hopefully recognize. This is Michael Schumacher. So Michael Schumacher is a German driver. He won the Formula One World Championship 7 times. He won 91 Formula One races, very successful, very famous, the most successful driver in our sports history. I had the privilege of working with Michael, and one of the really standout qualities that Michael had as an individual was that he saw himself as a leader. And so although he was driving the car, he realized he couldn't win the race unless the Ferrari team built the best car in the world. And when he joined Ferrari, they had struggled as a team for some years. Actually, it had been nearly 20 years since they'd won the Formula One World Championship. So Michael sat down with the chief executive of the company and the chief technology officer, and together they talked about how they could build a high-performing team within Ferrari back in 1996, 1997. And the role that Michael took in relation to that was to take center stage, almost literally, in terms of employee engagement. Now, how does a Formula One driver get involved in employee engagement? Well, in simple terms, Michael would go to the factory and he would walk around and visit. He would personally visit all the departments. So he would do a full factory tour, go in and talk to people in each of the functions and disciplines, build a rapport, invest a little bit of time. We're only talking about 2 hours a week that he would do that, but it had a huge effect on the organization, because if you can imagine you're an employee working for the Ferrari Formula One team, working in the software department or material science department, and the door of your office opens and Michael Schumacher walks in and is talking to you about how things are going. That's actually showing a level of interest in you that's quite inspirational, quite motivational. So that was the first thing that he did in terms of, it was a kind of factory walk around. The second thing that he did was he asked the team management if he could have a town hall meeting, if he could host a town hall meeting. And this took place actually every week or every fortnight, depending on where he was traveling in the world. But he would come back to the Ferrari factory in Italy, usually about once a fortnight during the season and once a week during the winter. And they would have a town hall meeting. And that town hall meeting would start at about 8:30 on a Tuesday morning. Attendance at the meeting was mandatory because Michael wanted everyone to be fully aligned behind the company's goals. And this alignment is incredibly important, because you have to ask yourself, if you stop a colleague in the corridor, if you stop an employee of your company in the corridor and you ask them about the company's current position, the good things that are happening and the bad things, will they know? Will they be up to date on where the business is at? Because if you don't have alignment if you don't have alignment behind the goals of the business, and you don't have alignment around the challenges facing the business, how can you possibly pull together as a team? So Michael would host that town hall meeting, and he would talk to everyone about how the team is performing. He would ask individuals to come up and join him on stage, and they would present about different projects, about different research and development initiatives that were going on. They would discuss their successes. So if they had a very successful weekend, they might be celebrating a great success at the previous race. Equally, if they had a failure, they'd be discussing their failures. So there'd be, if there was a broken component on the car, Michael would be, holding up the broken component and saying, okay, we need to understand why this component broke on Sunday. And would someone like to come on stage and present how we're going to fix this problem? Now, this was Michael doing a number of things. He was engaging with the staff. He was sharing information. He was driving accountability. So if you work for us and you're responsible for something, we hold you accountable, not because we want to blame you, but because that's your job. That's what you're accountable for. And steadily over time, he built that team along with the chief executive support. They built that into the most dominant team we had ever seen in Formula One history. In fact, he won the Formula One championship for 5 consecutive years. And the thing that was striking was that, yes, they had an amazing car, but actually they had an amazing car because they had an amazing team of people. And Michael had played a direct role in that. So when people ask me about a top Formula One driver like Michael, and they ask me, was he particularly skilled in terms of his reflexes or his courage and bravery? Actually, the point that I make is he was skilled as a people person. He knew how to lead. He knew how to inspire teams. And he certainly knew how to engage with his colleagues. And he has, as a result of that, left a very substantial legacy in our industry. In fact, everyone in Formula One now does the Michael Schumacher town hall meeting. This is Lewis Hamilton, who's currently leading the Formula One World Championship, and he's in fact going to win this year's World Championship as well, I would say. So he's going to become a 7 times world champion and match Michael Schumacher. Well, Lewis Hamilton, this is him hosting a town hall meeting at the team's factory about 6 kilometers from where I'm sitting this evening. And Lewis goes there and he talks to the staff, and again, they share their strengths and they share their weaknesses. They talk about their mistakes. They talk about the good things that have been happening. And exactly to the point that Saud made, sometimes it's Lewis, sometimes it's the driver who's going on stage and taking responsibility for a mistake. This is Lewis coming in for a pit stop at the Malaysian Grand Prix a few years ago. And unfortunately, he forgot which team he was driving for. So he stopped at the wrong team. A very humorous moment, I can tell you, for the rest of us, but not a very humorous moment for the Mercedes-Benz team, because they're waiting for their driver to come in for a high-performance pit stop. And he stops at the competition next door. So it was a kind of humorous moment for everyone else. But in that meeting, can you imagine, he had to stand up in front of all his colleagues in the team and explain why he made that mistake. Then they had a meeting to discuss how can we make sure that doesn't happen again. So actually, it's all part of this learning environment, accepting that sometimes we're going to have issues, but making sure that we don't repeat them. And I think that kind of supercharges our approach. Something else to share with you that Mercedes-Benz do, which is a part of the staff recognition and engagement program, is that when Mercedes-Benz wins a Formula One race, their drivers go on the podium to receive the trophy. And if you win a Formula One race, you get a trophy for the winning driver, but you also get a trophy for the winning team. And historically, the teams would send their chief executive onto the podium to accept the trophy for the winning team. But the Mercedes-Benz chief executive, Toto Wolff, who's a very successful entrepreneur, he decided a number of years ago that actually he would send ordinary staff members onto the podium to represent the team. And so here on the left-hand side, you have the 2 drivers, Lewis Hamilton and Valtteri Bottas, who drive for Mercedes-Benz, and they're holding up a mechanic. And this mechanic's name is Sam Bradley. He's a mechanic from the pit stop crew. He's a mechanic on Lewis Hamilton's car. And he's been given the ultimate recognition. He's literally being held up by the 2 drivers in winning the race to thank him for his contribution. And I cannot begin to tell you the impact that this activity has had on the entire workforce, that they can see that every one of them is recognized for their contribution to the team's success. On the right-hand side of the screen, there's a photograph of one of their female engineers, Holly Chapman. Now, Holly is a graduate from a university here in the UK. She specialized in engine technology. She's a powertrain engineer. She's 29 years of age, and at the Austrian Grand Prix back in July this year, she was asked by the team's chief executive to represent the team on the podium. And this photograph and the video of her being on the podium really went viral. There was a lot of commentary about this around the world. Who is this woman? Works in Formula One, works for Mercedes-Benz, and she's on the podium accepting the award for the team. So this is all about staff recognition, engagement, motivation, inspiration, making people feel part of a unified workforce that is going to celebrate its successes together and also discuss its problems so that it can keep that upward trajectory of performance. And to complete the kind of slide presentation, and exactly to Saud's point, Saud said these pit stops that we do are a great example of high performance teamwork. And as I explained earlier on, we're having 22 people, 36 tasks. We're looking for our ordinary employee to do something extraordinary. And we do that by empowering them, by giving them the freedom to work with their colleagues, to refine the process, to improve their training, to focus on their well-being, and ultimately to deliver for us an exceptional performance. And this is the current world record. It's 1.82 seconds, even faster than I remembered. 1.82 seconds for the team to replace the four wheels and tires on the car, and also adjust the car's aerodynamics. So you can't easily see how they do the adjustment on the car's aerodynamics, but believe me, they do a number of adjustments on the vehicle. So this is a great example for me of customer service. It's a great example for me of teamwork. It's a great example for me of world-class excellence when it comes to a group of people working together under a lot of pressure to deliver a positive outcome. The car comes in, it stops in the right location, the wheels are changed, the car goes back into the race. And when you look at it from the driver's perspective, it's almost an automated outcome. It's a team of people working together, almost like robots, in order to deliver that outcome. And as I said, it's a very inspirational thing to see. Each of these people are ordinary individuals like you and me. They are ordinary mechanics in a Formula One team doing an extraordinary job because they're working in a high performance team environment, and they're given the opportunity to be the very best that they can be. And I think that's a great spot for us to stop the slide presentation and just to take a few more questions before we end the session.
Thank you very much, Mark. I just have a question about the pit stop.
Yeah.
Do you think this will be disrupted by the artificial intelligence? So replacing the pit stop crews with robots and...
Okay, good question. I have a very clear answer for you. We're not allowed to. So the rules and regulations of Formula One prevent us from using technology in the pit stop beyond a certain level, because it would actually be quite easy for us to automate a pit stop. We could build a machine that could change the wheels and tires in a second. But we're not allowed to do it because it is a sport, and the driver has to remain fully in control of the car. So there's a human control over the car. And we need to have the pit crew as well being a team of people, not a team of technology. So that's covered by the rules and regulations. But artificial intelligence is used by us in other ways, in terms of manufacturing, in terms of race strategy, in terms of decision making. We actually deploy algorithms in managing all of the different scenarios that occur during the sport. It's a very complex sport requiring lots of calculations. It's a very data-driven environment. So artificial intelligence actually has a big role to play in this. But let me just say to you that from a human perspective, we see artificial intelligence and machine learning not as something to be frightened of. We see this as a great opportunity to empower future teams, because when we look at how technology has changed over the years, everyone resists it to begin with, but actually later on you get to see the benefit of embracing technology. And actually what technology usually does is it makes our world safer, it makes our world higher performing, and it changes jobs, but it doesn't make jobs disappear. So the types of jobs that we have in Formula One today are much more highly skilled technical jobs than they were 30 or 40 years ago. So we have gone from very much quite a dirty mechanical environment into a much cleaner digital environment as a result of the technological landscape that we work within.
You know, actually, and I strongly believe even if technology was used to replace the pit stop crew, I didn't think even the technology will outperform, you know, such team, you know, perform all this, changing the tires and the hydraulics of everything in less than 2 seconds. I mean, this is amazing. This is, I think, the best example we can ever see about the team dynamics and a high-performing team. It just performing all this, where you have 20 people in less than 2 seconds, and they have to do all this. You cannot just imagine it. I mean, but definitely, I don't think they use balls for the tires. Otherwise, it will take time. Okay, thank you. And I have many questions. I appreciate our audience for their interaction.
We've got some great questions, some really good questions there, Saud.
We still have more to come, actually.
Yeah.
So a question from Ahmed, and talking, all the questions will be around the human factor of the team. So Ahmed, the question is, what type of competencies are you looking when hiring people to work for you?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, Ahmed, thanks for the question. First of all, we're looking in, it depends on the role and the function that people are coming to work in. Obviously, in a lot of the technical roles, we're looking first and foremost for academic qualifications. I've spent quite a lot of time talking about our university programs, and there's no question in a wide range of technical roles, we're looking for people with, at the very least, an honours degree in engineering, quite often master's degrees as well. So the reality is that academic qualifications are extremely important in a number of areas. Then as you look broader into the non-technical roles, again, academia is important. If you're employing people in marketing or finance or whatever, the academic qualifications are necessarily going to be looked at. And of course, we're looking for high achievers. We are looking for people who are extremely good and have the qualifications to back that up. The next thing we're looking at is we're looking at experience, because if we're not, I mean, obviously not everyone who comes to work for us is freshly out of university. We are employing people of different ages. So then we're looking at experience. What is the relevance of their experience, the quality of the organization that they've worked at before, how long they have worked there. You know, for example, I mean, are they going from job to job every 2 years? Or are they an employee who actually has clearly had a career trajectory that means that they've been quite happy to work in a company for, let's say, 3 to 5 years. Yes, people change jobs more often these days, but we're looking for employees to join us with a longer term view of what they want. And I think we all know and recognize that one of the greatest expenses in terms of the human side in teams is if you've got staff turnover. If you've got people leaving and joining all the time, it's enormously time consuming, very expensive, and actually very disruptive to the team's success, because you're spending so much time and money training people and getting them to follow the systems and processes that you have in the business. The last thing you want is them leaving every so often, and then you have to have a new intake. So again, I would stress that in high performing teams, in successful teams, you see much lower staff turnover, and therefore you're recruiting people who are not only academically qualified and have the right competencies in that perspective, but also have a track record that shows that they're going to be a loyal employee and have a longer term vision of what they're going to do for you.
Okay. A question from Murtada about how you balance between building a culture and having a profitable business. And he said, you know, the sponsor, they're looking for the profit. And when you think about safety for us, managing risk, managing people, but also you have the sponsor who want to have very profitable business. So how you balance between these two?
Yeah, I don't see it as a balance. It's the same thing. If you have a successful team with the right culture, you're going to be a successful, profitable business. You know, you quite necessarily have to focus on what's going to be best for your business. And I think, Saud, you said in your introduction at the beginning of this evening, you know, we're in the business of building high performance teams for growth and profitability. And profitability for us doesn't mean that you have a dynamic on the cultural or the human side that's not going to work. Actually, they work together. In fact, in Formula One at the moment, if you look at the teams that are not successful as businesses, they're not successful culturally for their people either. And where you have unhappy teams which have tension, if you have unhappy teams where there are people under too much pressure, you typically have teams which are not so profitable. So actually, I see it in a different way. It's not about culture versus profitability. It's profitability because you have the right culture. And one final thing is to say is that it's not the sponsors who determine how our businesses operate. Sponsors are simply a customer. Sponsors are providing us with money in return for marketing services. It's not the sponsors who determine that. It's ourselves. It's our own teams. It's our own leadership. So we are masters of our own destiny. And there's no question that profitability is directly related to having the right business culture.
Okay. Another question from Abdullah Al-Aufi. And okay, now you have a presence in 22 countries, I think.
Yeah.
And he said, when Formula One went to global, how did you deal with the different culture and how does it affect the team's engagement?
Yeah, Abdullah, you're so right. When we started going global, not only were we essentially a European sport, but we had essentially European employees. So most people who worked in Formula One back in 2000 were, you know, British, French, Italian, Swiss, German. Now, 20 years later, as I mentioned earlier on, we have Chinese, we have Japanese, we have Singaporeans, we have Malaysians, we have people from the Gulf, the United States. I was talking the other day to a young engineer. He's from Sao Paulo in Brazil. So he left Brazil at the age of 18 to come to university here and do his degree in Formula One engineering. How do we deal with that? Well, I mean, there are a number of, there's a lot of factors to consider. The first thing to say is that wherever people come from, they understand that English is the language of Formula One, just as English is the language of the international business community. And this is a tough ask for people, you know, wanting to come and work in Formula One from around the world. And as a result, it will not come as any surprise to learn that when we get graduates joining our engineering programs from China, Japan, Singapore, etc., you know, one of the first things they're doing is making sure that they have not just the right English language ability, but actually the necessary vocabulary from an engineering point of view to work in our environment, because it is a very specialized set of vocabulary that you need to have. I think the broader answer to your question is that it's not so much how did we deal with having different cultures, it was more what happened as a result of having different cultures. And what we realized very quickly, I mean, really quickly, was that by being more diversified in the people who were coming to work for us, we had a diversity of thought, we had a diversity of creativity, we had people bringing their ideas based on different cultural backgrounds. And this is a very powerful thing. I think the best way I've ever heard it described is, if you're a business and you think about your customers are a very wide range of people. So actually, why do you want to have a narrow range of people working for you? You want to also have a wide range of people working for your business, because they bring you the diversity that then enables you to create the outcomes that are going to appeal to your customers. And I mean, I think we are still on the journey in Formula One towards a truly diverse, globalized business. But we are a long way down that road compared to where we were in 2020. And it's a wonderful thing to see. So it's led to quite a lot of change in our environment. As I said, we now have women working in our environment in technical roles much more than we ever had in the past. And certainly we have a diversity in terms of nationality. And it's not been a problem. It's been a wonderful thing to witness, and that it's added real strength to our organizations.
Thank you, Mark. A question from Latif about the team dynamic. She said, is the dynamic a planned process or is it intuitive?
Okay, we believe very firmly in plans and process. Formula One's all about building a winning system, but part of that winning system is understanding the human dynamic. So our industry is packed full of technology and bright engineers using that technology to create amazing machines. In the middle of all that technology, you have people, and there is a danger that everyone can be so focused on the technology and the systems and processes that they forget about the human factors. That's why I was speaking earlier on about things like the town hall meetings, things like the factory visits by senior leadership to walk around and talk to people. I mean, let me give you another example of engagement. Every day at a Formula One race, so Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, so we have a 4-day event for each Formula One race. Every day we have 2 meetings, one in the morning at 6:30 a.m., one in the evening at 6:30 p.m. And in those meetings, we have all the heads of department. And that's not just the people at the race, that's also the people remotely back at our factory. So taking into account time differences, we have got our remote people online from back in Europe. We have our people in the field working remotely. And at those 2 meetings every day, we talk about the current topics, the issues, the challenges, any updates on the human side, the technical side, etc. What we're doing there is building into our process the people factor, making sure everyone is on the same page, everyone knows exactly where we're at, and building a system that is human-centric. Because at the end of the day, we are not going to achieve anything if our people are not aligned behind what it is that we're doing. And that's why I passionately believe in this high-performance team culture. If you invest the time in your people, you get such a reward from that.
Yeah. Okay, I have a question from Jamal. It's a very long, but he gave a situation or maybe a scenario.
Reading it, yeah.
Yes. Do you want me to read it or you?
Yeah. Yeah. So the question from Jamal is, you know, if you consider talent, we need to we need to have a personnel planning, I suppose, career development in terms of a ladder to climb through the business, steps to take after 2, 3, or 4 years from engineer to senior manager, manager of engineering. And that new employees obviously want to know what is their career plan. And then linked to that, also that we need to invest and spend money and budget on this career development, because clearly it cannot be open-ended. So this is a great question, Jamal. And let me just talk to you a little bit about where I see that. So if you remember in my slide presentation, and actually I'm just going to go back and share this particular slide. So in my slide presentation, I showed you how we have diversified our business model into more broad-based engineering. Now, this actually cuts to the core of your question. So when an engineer comes to work for us now, we not only can show them a career development plan in Formula One, but we can show them a career development plan which will give them opportunities outside in other areas. And to answer your question, of course, we have fixed budgets. We don't have open-ended budgets. But the reality is that we are showing our individual employees that if they are loyal to us, we will be loyal to them. If they give us great performance, we will enable them to enjoy a very fruitful career. And quite frankly, over the 5, 10, 15, 20-year period, they're going to have amazing opportunities. Let me just explain another dimension. Of course, for example, if you come to work for us in Formula One, a lot of people want to work in the race team to begin with. So you can imagine, especially the young staff, when they come and join for us, they want to travel the world, have a glamorous job, and be at the sharp end of this very dynamic sporting environment. Well, the first thing is that we're not going to send our youngest staff around the world because they don't have the experience. So to begin with, they have to spend the first few years building their experience back at headquarters and enabling us to evaluate their capabilities, to provide them with additional training if necessary, until they are ready to deliver for us in the field at the Formula One races around the world. So having come to work for us, you've gained your experience at the factory, then you get promoted onto the race team and you can start traveling with the team. Now, not surprisingly, once people have been traveling with the team for 5 or 10 years, quite often their lives and their priorities have changed. Maybe they've met their partner and decided to get married, have children. We can then rotate them back into a factory-based job. And that's the part at which we can say to them, do you want to continue working in Formula One? Or actually, we have these other engineering client projects that we can put you into. And then suddenly they can find themselves working on an aerospace project with Airbus or an automotive project with BMW. So at every stage in the career development, our employees are being offered opportunities, and we are taking that into account in our planning with them. And I think that's been, for me, one of the great developments over the last 20 years. As our industry has matured and developed a much more diversified approach to its business, we actually create much greater opportunities for our staff.
Thank you very much. So hopefully Jamal is happy with this clarification. Thank you. And another question from Mahmoud, and he said, again, about recruiting the best talent. So he said, what is the most challenging step when recruiting the best talent?
What's the most challenging step in recruiting the best talent? I think for us, it is absolutely at the recruitment stage. When you've got I mean, as I explained earlier on, Mercedes-Benz had one job. They had over 7,000 applications. So we're not short of people who want to come and work for us. When we're then recruiting those people, we want to make sure that from a short list of candidates, we are picking the absolute best people. And I see mistakes made at that stage all the time. And I would say the most challenging thing, therefore, is that because we are under pressure, you know, it's a very high performance environment. We have a lot of deadlines. We have a lot of pressure. There's no such thing as a quiet time of year for us. We're always busy. And therefore, I think the biggest challenge when it comes to recruitment is that when we have a vacancy, we rush to fill it. And the problem with rushing to fill vacancies is that quite often you can end up filling the vacancy with someone who's simply available as opposed to someone who's the best person. And I think that this is a very difficult topic, especially for the HR colleagues here on the call here this evening. But I'm sure we've all experienced the situation where you fill a role and the person looks like they're good on paper and actually they interview very well. And then you find out within a matter of weeks, months, that actually this has not been the ideal candidate. And we see that in Formula One even still, where people rush to fill vacancies. And you have to ask yourself the following question: why, not only why is that person applying to the job, but what is the context within which they're applying for the job? Are they simply applying for the job because they need a job? Or are they applying for a job because they actually want to come and work for your business? So this is a very counterintuitive thing to say, but when we are desperate to fill a role, we need to actually give ourselves some time to fully evaluate the best talent that's out there and to give ourselves a little bit of breathing space, because the cost of recruiting the wrong person is so high and so disruptive to the organization. Get the recruitment right, and it pays dividends for a long time in the years ahead. Get the recruitment wrong, and you're constantly up against changes and disruption, and it's extremely damaging to the business.
Great. I think that's also tied to the question that asked by Latifa. Latifa asking about the recognition scheme for teams and how do you reward the people?
Yeah, so I talked in my presentation about the recognition program that we do, that Mercedes-Benz does, where they literally recognize staff when they win a race. They've got that recognition program. In a high-performance team environment, one of the things that we do is we are monitoring people's performance all the time, but we're also rewarding people's performance all the time. I'll give you an example. At Red Bull, there is a discretionary rewards program which any manager can deploy on a monthly basis, so that if you have a member of staff who's just done something exceptional, they've made a customer particularly happy, or they've helped a colleague, they've gone above and beyond the call of duty, there can be an instant reward, an instant recognition for that individual, and it can be escalated through the whole company. So if someone does a particularly brilliant job, the manager has a mechanism by which the whole company can get to see that this person is being rewarded for the job well done. Recognition programs for me are probably one of the single most effective ways of building the right culture in an organization. There comes a point when people are no longer motivated by money. They're motivated by much, much broader things. And I remember very well in the world of football, another sport, a very famous and very successful leader of one of Europe's top football teams. I met him at a dinner, and we were talking about successful business cultures. And he said to me, he said, "What do you think the two most important words in the English language are for leaders?" And I said, "I don't know." And he said, "Well, it's the words well done." He said, "If I say well done to an employee," he said, "because I'm the chief executive, that person they'll go home, they'll tell their husband or their wife or their parents or their friends, you know, the boss said, well done today. That means a lot to people. And I think we have all been there, where we get that little bit of recognition. And it doesn't need to be public recognition. It can simply be on a one-to-one basis with someone to a staff member saying, you have done a great job for us today. Thank you very much. And whether you give them a physical reward or not, actually the verbal acknowledgement in itself is an incredibly powerful weapon.
Yeah, great. And I'm sure one of the main reasons that this business has been sustained with all the challenges internally, externally, and you reach the point where you have a very high performing teams is the quality of the leadership you have in the Formula One. So the question of Mohammed Al-Hoshan, Mohammed said, what are the leadership competencies you look for when hiring supervisor or manager level, and how you develop your leaders?
Yeah, very good point. So, well, first of all, we know that to have great leaders in our industry, we need great communicators. It's a very high pressure environment. Yes, we want people who are competent, and I talked about the competencies that we required earlier on in terms of academic qualifications, experience, etc. But in terms of personal qualities, we're looking for leaders who are good with people. We're looking for people who are very articulate, able to communicate, who want to communicate, and who recognize that the strength that this brings. And so on a supervisory and a managerial level, we don't want the person who closes their door and shuts people out. We want the person who opens their door and goes and talks and empowers and communicates with their staff. And in regards to, so there was a second part of that question. Let me see.
How you develop your leaders?
Yeah, how we develop them. Actually, yeah, that's a really good point. So in terms of leadership development, there are a number of initiatives which we use. One, of course, is that the larger teams, from a management point of view, very often will send people into academic courses such as MBAs. And MBAs are still used in practice by many organizations here in the UK, and certainly in Formula One. We've seen that time and again. I remember when I was going through mine back in the late 2000s, late 1990s rather, you know, I was given the time necessary to go and do the studying. Now that means the organization providing the support necessary for that. But the reason why we invest in leadership training and development is that the leadership training and development will pay you so many rewards in the long term. All too often, we have seen examples where people get promoted simply because they have a lot of experience, simply because they're getting older, simply because they have a lot to give because of their experience within the industry. Well, promoting someone into a leadership role just because they've worked for the business for 10 or 15 years isn't a very good idea if they don't have the necessary leadership skills. And providing those leadership skills is absolutely essential. And when I do my lecturing, I lecture at the London Business School. When I do my lectures, I'm quite surprised how often I'm sitting in front of a class full of people who are actually in senior leadership roles and have had actually no training and development given to them. And as a result, they're struggling to deal particularly with the human factors. And in Formula One, because it's such a technical sport, we have a lot of experienced engineers who get promoted. And actually you end up with these engineers who have 150, 200 people working for them, and they don't have the leadership skills. So that's why we invest so much time, effort, and money in making sure we send them out to get the necessary training. And leadership development in Formula One, I promise you, is a significant aspect of our HR budgets that we allocate every year, because we want that pipeline of talent to flow up through the business and provide for our succession planning, so that as the senior leadership leaves the business in the longer term, that we've got the next set of leaders ready to take over the business.
Yeah, thank you. A question from Ali. He said, in the environment of Formula One, everything is about fast and requires high performance teams. But in real life situation, you are bounded with other slow processes. How can you do this?
Yeah, great question, Ali. So I work with a number of Formula One drivers, and One of them is a guy called David Coulthard, who raced in Formula One for 15 years and was very successful. And David actually loves to talk about this point, because he said, when you're used to working in such a high performance environment, and then you go into a restaurant and the service is lousy, or you go to a hotel and you're waiting at reception for 20 minutes for someone to pay attention to you, you're thinking about the Formula One pit stop. You know, it takes 1.9 seconds to change 4 wheels, but it takes 20 minutes to check into a hotel. And so actually the answer to your question is that in real life situations outside of Formula One, we see that most of what's happening is not high performing. It's actually a compromise. It's a set of compromises, and it's very frustrating. It's one of the reasons why I think, you know, for us, when we work in Formula One for a number of years, it becomes quite addictive, because you get to see what happens when you run a high performance in business. You do things in days and weeks that take most organizations months or years to do. I mean, for example, every year we design a completely new Formula One car, and we design it, we develop it, we manufacture it, and we bring it to market in 6 months. In the car industry, it takes about 2.5 years to create a car. Now, we're much smaller than a car company, and yet we're doing it far faster. And this is one of the reasons why so many people in business look at Formula One as a great example of what is possible. And when I go into other organizations and I talk to them about the environment that we work in, what I find really interesting is that the human factor is actually the root cause of poor performance. I was speaking to a big engineering company recently, a globally successful engineering company. One of the projects that they're working on is 7 years late. And I asked them, why is this project 7 years late? And they said, well, they started giving me 101 reasons, which all came down to blaming other people. So they were blaming this person, blaming that person, blaming this organization. I mean, in Formula One, we can't be 7 days late. Forget 7 years. So to my mind, it comes down to what is the leadership prepared to accept? Do you want top level performance, or are you prepared to accept constant compromise? And, you know, I passionately believe that when people pull together and work in a coherent, aligned, focused way, it is amazing what you can achieve. And you only have to look at what's happening in the world today with COVID-19. Typically, it takes 4 or 5 years for a vaccine to be developed at the very least. We're talking about months for a vaccine to be developed at the moment. And that's because the whole industry is pulled together around the world, including competitors working together. So I'm a great believer that when you set a top objective, when you really are ambitious about what you want to achieve, it's amazing what you can do.
Thank you, Mark. Maybe last question we'll take from our audience before we conclude. And I still have maybe some questions, if you don't mind. Question from Bajaba said, how KPIs is set and monitor for each sector of Formula One?
Yeah.
And what kind of benchmarking do you use?
Okay, so I wish I actually had one of my documents here. I could show it to you, because so we have KPIs for everything. We have, you know, if you look at the car, take the Formula One car, we have KPIs for speed, for performance, for fuel economy, for reliability, for safety, for product lifecycle management, for human performance, you know, and these are reviewed on a weekly basis. So we have a wide range of KPIs. And these KPIs essentially come in 2 forms. We have internal KPIs, internal for our business. So how are we performing within ourselves? And then we have external benchmarking with the competition. There's something that I can share with you is that between 2002 and 2008, Toyota Motor Corporation competed in Formula One. So obviously very famous, very successful Japanese car manufacturer. they famously have the most efficient manufacturing facilities for the car industry. The Toyota Corolla, one of the most successful production vehicles in the world. They did Formula One for 9 consecutive years, and they never won a race. They never won anything in 9 years. And one of the interesting things was that I was able to interview their chief technical officer a few years later. And actually we did a seminar together, and it was a seminar on failure. So it's just quite an interesting concept. Normally we get asked to talk about success. This was a seminar about failure, examples of failure. And he said to me, one of the reasons that Toyota failed was that all of their KPIs, metrics, and benchmarking was internal. So he said, year to year, we kept congratulating ourselves on the fact that we were improving 2% or 5% or 4%. It all looked wonderful. The problem is we weren't benchmarking against the competition. And it was against the competition that we needed to be benchmarking our progress. So he said basically we had 9 very successful years of competing against ourselves, but we weren't competing against the competition. And at the end of the day, that's the most important thing. So KPIs and metrics across pretty well anything that you care to think about, that data-driven culture that we enjoy in Formula One, extremely important to us in understanding how we are performing and the best ways in which we can make progress in the future.
Thank you very much. We only have 5 minutes, and I have 2 questions, and we still to the conclusion of that. And my first question is about knowledge management. Yes, you have very high performing teams, but with time you start losing people. I mean, either they retire or move somewhere else. How do you manage the knowledge? And I think you call it like corporate memory. How you make sure that you sustain the business, you sustain the record of the team, even when some people are moving or changing?
Yeah, I think this is a really good point. I mean, first of all, we are very blessed now that we live in an era where we have a very, very data-centric businesses, and our currency, the most important currency in Formula One, is information. And we have vast amounts of data. We can store that data, we can secure that. And within that data, within that information, actually is the answer to so many of the questions about our business, our intellectual property, and our knowledge. So our knowledge base is essentially data, and we capture that data, we store it, we protect it. And actually, in many respects, that's our most important, after our people, our most important asset is our information, is that knowledge. The second thing is the human dimension of that. And exactly to your point, Saud, one of the things that we try to do is to develop a corporate memory and a corporate set of values and a way of doing business, which we pass from generation to generation. Now, let's be clear. When I was growing up, generation to generation was every 25 years. We're now in a business world where generation to generation is more like every 5 to 10 years. So actually what we're trying to do is to make sure that, you know, the people in their 30s are passing on the information to the people in their 20s, the people in their 40s are passing on the information to the people in their 30s. And for senior leaders in the business like me, it becomes incredibly important that aside from empowering people to deliver for us on a day-to-day basis, that we're also helping the organization to step back and look at the big picture of where we are as a business, what our values are, what our priorities are, and make sure that that knowledge in terms of what we do, how we do it, and how our business has got to where it is today is fully understood by everyone who works for us. There are some pretty frightening statistics around these days about the number of businesses that survive for more than 20 years. It's actually incredibly few businesses now that remain essentially the same for more than 20 years anywhere in the world. So we live in a much more compressed time scale for businesses. And this is why it's so important that whilst we're operating, we protect that knowledge, we protect that information which we have as a business, and that we pass it on intact to the next generation of leaders coming through.
Yeah, thank you, Mark. My last question is that you talked about how you manage mistakes and how people come to the stage where they are not afraid to talk about their mistakes. And I think when you come to that stage, You can easily learn from mistakes, become a learning opportunity. And I'm sure there's a lot being done from the management and leadership side to make sure that people feel secure. So if you tell us maybe 1, 2, or 3 factors that will make or break any team, regardless of the business, what would you say?
Sure. I would say, you know, when it comes to making mistakes, what I find with really inspirational is that the great leaders in our sport will take a person who's made a mistake and actually invest in them, understand what went wrong, how can we help them to avoid making that mistake in the future, and quite often do something exceptional, which is to recognize that that person becomes a broader learning experience for the organization. I'll give you an example. One of the teams that I've been very fortunate to work with, we had an engineer who made a mistake, and as a result of his error, we actually suffered quite a big accident. So there was quite a big accident that came from human error. Now that individual was quite worried that he was going to lose his job. Not only did he not lose his job, but after the investigation was carried out, he was made head of department for that specific area. I mean, there is an extraordinary example of how you can take a negative situation and turn it to your advantage, because that individual, I can promise you, he will never go to work again and make that mistake a second time. It had such a potentially catastrophic effect for him personally and for his team. He will spend the rest of his life focused on making sure that he delivers great performance. But the most exciting thing about that story is that the chief executive of that business had the wisdom to see that this person is a good person. They came to work every day motivated and inspired to work for us and to make a difference. And they made a mistake, and making mistakes is human. And actually, as we run businesses, it's that ability to connect with people, to understand what makes them tick, what makes them get out of bed in the morning and want to come to work for us and want to keep coming back and working for us. There is the essence of what we as leaders need to do in order to build high-performing teams.
Great. Thank you very much, Mark. And I have no more question, but in just 2 minutes, as a conclusion, as probably you have noticed, the majority of our audience are from HR background, HR professionals. So what do you see the role of the HR as a function and people to help the business to have the best and the highest performing teams in our business? I
see the role of HR as in assisting the leadership teams to recruit, manage, and develop the very best people that we can in our business. All too often, my experience is that HR gets brought in to solve problems, to fight fires, to deal with human issues. And very often those human issues have actually been created by the organization itself because leaders have not had the necessary training or development. So I see all too often HR is put in a difficult position. And yet my strong belief is that HR is perhaps the most vital function in any business, because it is HR professionals who can show leadership teams how to recruit the right staff, train the right staff, empower them, engage with them, and retain them so that you build a happy, successful, high-performance team of people. And I have to say that my biggest takeaway from 35 years in Formula One is that it's a people business. And because it's a people business, it is the HR discipline that has the most critical role in helping us to define how we build those great outcomes that we're looking for.
Great. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mark. And we come to the end of our webinar tonight.
Thank you.
And I really appreciate the time that you spend, Mark, sharing your thoughts on the success story. And thank you for our audience. It's been a very interactive session. We still have many questions. So Mark, I don't know if you don't mind, if you can just share the last slide with your contacts.
Yeah, sure,
so
I'll do that.
Colleagues, if they have questions or maybe they want advice, or maybe they need to know about the new revision of your book. I know that you are revising your book.
Yeah, I'm doing that. Well, you can contact me. First of all, you can contact me directly through Christiana at Batten Global, and her email is there on the screen. Once again, thanks to Batten Global for making this possible, and thanks, Saud, for the time this evening with the Human Capital Club and having this opportunity. I'm also available on LinkedIn, and Christiana and I can come back to you if you have any particular questions that you want to follow up with. It's been a real privilege to spend these couple of hours with you this evening. Thanks for tearing yourself away from your families to listen to me talking about the high performance team environment of Formula One. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mark, for your time. And thank you for also our partner with this, Batten Global. Thank you, Christiana, for helping this session and this webinar to come to reality. I really appreciate your effort being done, and we're proud of that. And just also another advice for our audience, go to the YouTube and put Mark Gallagher, and you probably will find some great keynote speeches by Mark in some of the global events, just to know more about the topic and more about the Formula One business. Thank you very much. The session, the webinar being recorded, and we will have it available to everyone on our YouTube channel, part of the Saudi Human Capital Club. Thank you very much, Mark. Thank you, Christiana. And thank you to our audience.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.